Hi there everyone, welcome back to the Vision by Design YouTube channel. My name is Trevor and this is Dr. Sarah Keep from Vision by Design Optometry and Vision Therapy. And today we're going to be talking about visual issues to watch for while homeschooling during the COVID closures. So why don't you give us some facts and statistics about some vision related issues?
Absolutely. So it's pretty safe to say that social distancing has hit everybody. It's caused dramatic changes in our daily routines for adults and students alike. So I understand the unprecedented changes of having to homeschool children while also having to work remotely. This can be really overwhelming at times, but it's actually a really good opportunity for parents to actually observe the way their children are performing schoolwork. This is something that we're not able to typically do when most of the tasks are done in the classroom. I see children all the time in the office who have visual issues that are affecting their school performance. It can sometimes be challenging to understand how these issues actually cause poor school performance, especially in a child who actually has perfect vision and doesn't require glasses. But there are actually very important behaviors to look for that parents may not have the opportunity to witness otherwise, as I said, if we're typically in the classroom. So I'd like to spend some time today talking about what visual skills are involved in certain classroom tasks. And then we'll spend some time discussing some behaviors that teachers and now parents can look for and what they mean and what we can actually do about it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for that introduction. That was great. And I think you're going to really enjoy this video. So question number one that people might have is, what are some common behaviors that parents might observe?
Yeah, that's a great question. So 80% of the information that we gather in a classroom is actually visual information. So if a child simply struggles with gathering this information, it can be really challenging for them to actually understand the information presented to them. So then it can affect school performance. So we will go through and chat about some behaviors. Common ones to look for are avoidance of near work. If a child just really doesn't enjoy reading, if they have a slow reading speed or it takes them a really long time to finish their assignments, if they have a lot of frustration when they're doing schoolwork, and then certain behaviors like being really wiggly in their chair or certain postures where they're laying their head down or closing an eye, or having to follow with their finger or scan with their head. Those are all behaviors that we can look for, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we continue.
Okay, that's great. So you must get this question a lot. My child sees 20/20, so they don't have problems with their eyes.
Absolutely. So whenever we think of good vision, we immediately think about seeing clearly. So I know a lot of times if we ask somebody what does good sight mean, they're immediately going to say it means seeing 20/20 or seeing clearly or not needing glasses. But seeing clearly is actually only one visual skill that's required for good learning and good reading. So if you take a look at reading a paragraph, for instance, so our eyes have to move from one word to the next. And we also have to line our eyes up properly so that they're both pointed at the same word so that they don't see double. And while our eyes are moving as a team together along that line, we have to be able to make a really accurate jump to the next line so we don't lose our space. And while we're doing that, our eyes are also having to focus so that the images are clear. So there's a lot of different visual skills going on at the same time, even just to gather the visual information. And then there's also components of our visual system that allow us to understand the information. So we have to be able to, recognize the word. So we have word recognition so that if we see a certain shape of the word, we know what that word is. Or be able to understand that, if a bee is oriented in a different way, that actually has a different meaning. So there's lots of different visual skills required in reading beyond just being able to see the letters clearly.
Right. Now, Dr. Sarah, what sort of behaviors should parents look for and what do they have to do with the eyes?
Yeah, that's a great question. So some of the biggest behavioral red flags are just avoidance of near work or lack of attention when reading. So especially with young kids, reading should be exciting to them. It's a new skill that they're learning. If it's something that they really don't enjoy, that should be a red flag that there could be something going on with their visual system, especially if they enjoy it when the parent reads to them, but they dislike it when they have to read to themselves. Other things that we look for are reading speed. So I mean, if your child reads a lot slower than what their peers would at school, or if it takes them a really long time to do their assignments, that can be another common symptom, and we'll talk a little bit about why that is later.
Sure.
Oftentimes as well, parents will say, you know, my child is really smart, but they just don't perform well in school. So if you have a smart child with very poor grades where it just doesn't seem to make sense, they seem like they should be able to understand it, that can be a red flag as well. So I'll go through and talk about some of the common binocular vision issues and what specific symptoms kind of line up with these symptoms. So one of the most common binocular vision issues is a convergence issue. So a convergent eye movement is just your eyes moving inward to see for up close.
Okay.
So when we look far away, our eyes are pointed straight. And then when we go to look up close, our eyes move in to be pointed towards the same target. So a child who has a convergence issue, their eyes just don't quite line up properly. So sometimes they can struggle and move the eyes together, but then they fatigue and then their eyes start to drift apart. So what can actually happen is they can sometimes see double, where the words may look like they kind of move in and out of focus. And this is actually what it looks like for a child who has convergence insufficiency. So you can see that that's very distracting and uncomfortable. So children will often have eye strain, they'll have fatigue as they're really struggling to try to get those images together. It's because it's uncomfortable. Oftentimes they'll just avoid the task. I mean, something that causes discomfort is not something that we're going to enjoy doing. They also have reduced reading comprehension, because you can imagine if you're trying to read a paragraph that's moving in and out of focus, you have to pause and wait for it to actually come together again, and then you don't remember what you've read previously. This can also slow down reading speed as well, because they do actually have to pause and wait for the images to come back together. Another really common vision issue is accommodative issues or eye focusing issues. So our visual system, when we look far away, our eye muscles are relaxed. And then when we go to look up close, the muscles have to focus. So in a normal patient, that should just be an easy movement. It's not anything, that we should feel. It shouldn't cause any discomfort. But a child who has an eye focusing issue, they really have to strain their eyes to try to maintain focus. And again, that can be really uncomfortable. So you can imagine if you were squeezing your fist, and you had to do that for 10 or 15 minutes at a time, it actually causes physical discomfort. So that's not comfortable to do that. I mean, if you were trying to hold your hands in a fist now, by now you've probably given up. So the same thing happens with children. They go through and try to do these reading assignments, and it causes discomfort. So they give up and they avoid the task. So sometimes it can be misinterpreted that they have an attentional issue, or they're lazy, or they don't enjoy school, but it's just uncomfortable for them to do. These kids often have poor endurance or reduced or fatigue and stuff like that as well. So if they're doing tasks, they might be able to perform well if they've been doing them for 10 or 15 minutes, but as the assignment time wears on, they just don't have the endurance to finish them properly. So those are behavioral issues that are really important to look for as well. Another eye skill, as we talked about, is an eye tracking skill or eye movement. So eye movements are critical for reading. So we have to physically move our eyes from one word to the next. And if that's something that's challenging for a child to do, they actually end up reading words out of order. So when that happens, this is what it can look like when your eyes are moving around on a page. And so you can imagine that as your eyes are moving like that and a child is reading words out of order, it just doesn't make sense at all. So what we'll often see is a child who will struggle through that, and they'll read their words out of order. And sometimes when you listen to your child read out loud, you'll notice that they do actually skip words or skip lines. And then they don't understand what they read because it doesn't make sense. So a child who has a better reading comprehension when their parents read to them, or again enjoys reading more when their parents read to them, can be a sign of a vision issue. We often will have parents in the clinic where they don't experience these symptoms. They have an eye tracking issue, but their child doesn't read words out of order. And that can happen for a child who, they really try to persevere. So their reading speed might slow down. So, they do have good reading comprehension, but it takes them a really long time. Or they have to follow with their finger or follow with their head. So there's other behaviors to look for as well, because they don't always affect school performance. Some kids actually modify the way they do things to take out the visual skill from the equation, but then it's a much less efficient way to perform this work.
Right. Now, I bet a lot of light bulbs went off for some of the parents out there because they might be noticing some of these behaviors with their children. And, speaking with Dr. Sarah would be a good start to maybe unlocking some of these things here. So the next question that some parents may have is, what are some challenges to increase computer time while homeschooling during this COVID period?
That's a great question. So there's more computer time than ever before. I mean, we're doing our schoolwork on the computer now. So previously, before, where they would look at their teacher, at the end of the classroom and they get a little bit of a visual break, they're now looking at their teacher on a computer screen. And then they take a break and they look at their phone to chat with their friends, and then they're playing video games. There's like an unprecedented amount of near work now. So that can cause a lot of visual stress. Our eyes were just not designed to focus up close for this period of time. So the biggest thing you can do is take breaks. So even for an adult, we recommend every 20 minutes, take a 20-second break to look 20 feet away. We call it the 20-20-20 rule. This just gives those muscles in our eyes just a chance to relax briefly, and then they can carry on with the task. Now, some kids where they really struggle with focusing, they might need more frequent breaks. So I usually have parents just look for signs of visual stress. And that can be, your child wiggling around in the chair, or, pushing things further away, or starting to get uncooperative. So if this is happening, just take a break. Sometimes they need a 5-minute break just to kind of reset. Other things, having a really good ergonomic workstation. So we all know about this for ourselves. It's something that we don't often think about for kids. If you can get a workstation that's sized properly for your child, that can make a big difference. So a chair where their feet can actually be firmly planted on the floor. Our eyes move from our body as a base. So if we have better support in our bodies, we're going to have more control over our eye movements. So having more ergonomics can be really helpful as well.
Okay. Another question that parents might have is, are there other helpful tips to reduce eye strain when doing schoolwork that doesn't involve a computer?
Yeah, for sure. So, of course, some children are going to be doing tasks that are not on the computer, so they're going to have assignments and stuff like that. And there's lots of stuff that you can do to make that more comfortable for your child as well. So the working distance, or where the material is placed, can be really helpful. So the distance that they should be working on, and this is actually really important for phone use as well, that they're not holding it really close to their face, but we call it Harmon's distance, which is basically if you hold your arm at a 90-degree bend, that's the distance of where their work should be. So that's important to note, because a small child, their natural working distance will actually be closer to them because their arms are smaller. Another thing that can be really helpful is using a slanted surface. So we have slant boards in the office where it actually just raises things up. It provides a better visual angle. If you don't have a slant board, you can use something like a binder just to prop up their assignments. Other things that are really helpful, if they are skipping words or rows, you can have them follow with a finger, or put a ruler underneath, or cover it with a piece of paper. This, of course, doesn't solve the underlying visual issue, but it can help them, to perform a little bit better while we're kind of stuck in this unusual situation. Larger font size can be really important as well. So if you're printing assignments off for your child and they kind of struggle with eye movements and stuff like that, print it a little bit bigger. You don't have to focus as accurately or move your eyes as accurately, when words are bigger. And for some children, they get visually distracted by having too much stuff on a page. So if that's the case, then, if they are working on a sheet that has multiple sections to their assignment, cover it up with a piece of paper, and then remove visual distractions. So if they're working at a workstation, make sure that the desk is really clean and there's not, a lot of other stuff around that's going to cause a lot of distractions for them.
Right. Now, will these tips treat my child's vision issues?
Yeah. They don't, unfortunately. They're all accommodations to make things, more efficient and a little bit easier on your child during these circumstances while we're all homeschooling during the COVID closures. So they can be really helpful at reducing symptoms in some children. And honestly, if it's mild, that might be all that the child needs. But it doesn't actually cure the underlying issue. So if your child has a focusing issue or a tracking issue, and they still are having problems despite using some of these accommodations, then it is something that really should be treated, because it can cause reduce school performance, especially as your child gets into the higher school levels and they're no longer learning to read, but they're starting to read. They're starting to read to learn. So as font size and stuff like that becomes smaller, the visual issues tend to actually have more of an impact on school performance. So use these now while they're necessary, but they're not a substitute for actually treating the underlying issue.
Okay, now I guess the big question is, Dr. Sarah, so if we see these behaviors in my child, what should we do about it?
Calling our office is a great place to start. So I know a lot of parents have questions about, if certain things they're observing, could they be an eye issue? We actually offer a complimentary consultation with one of our vision therapists so that you can sit down with a vision therapist. We do it remotely. It's done on phone. And you can kind of bring up some of the concerns you have with either your child's school performance, and our therapists can offer suggestions on, things to look for, or, things that you can do that are specific to your child. If you are really quite concerned, you can also come in for an eye exam. So, if parents aren't sure if they want to necessarily go through and do our full assessment process, we can see them for a routine eye exam. I always do some screener tests and stuff like that while I do their regular exam, to see if they maybe are something. They are a child who is potentially, displaying these symptoms because of a vision issue as opposed to some other underlying issue. So we usually have a very good idea by the end of their exam if there's a likelihood that, poor school performance or certain behaviors they're seeing are from an underlying vision issue.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that. It's very informative, and I think people will get a lot of good information out of this. And if this sounds like your child, then I think the best thing for you to do would be to call Vision by Design and or check out the website visionbydesignoptometry.com and check them out. Make an appointment to see Dr. Sarah, one of the other vision therapists there, and get some help. At least get an assessment. It's a great place to start, and we will see you guys on the next video.